Celebrating 49 years on the air, award-winning Farm Week is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, Europe wants to control Mississippi timberland. So who's in charge? Plus, the USDA bridging the gap, an announcement hot off the press. In Southern gardening, sometimes you just gotta stay with what works, right? And in our feature, Zac heads back to the Christmas tree farm where memories are still being made. Farm Week starts right now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zac Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. Great to have you with us again here on Farm Week. Merry Christmas. Mississippi's #2 ag industry, forestry, is reeling, at least temporarily. Thanks to a pushed-up deadline, landowners have been told they'll have to comply with a new rule if they want to sell their timber in Europe. WLBT's Adarius McCormick talked with one tree farmer about the EU's impact on his business.
This forest has stood for 8 generations, with families growing, sustaining, and depending on it. But now it's being treated like a deforestation zone, and the rule behind it is coming from outside the United States.
It's kind of popped up out of nowhere.
The European Union Deforestation Regulation, or EUDR, says mills can only buy wood from landowners who promise their land will always stay forest, with no chance to use it differently in the future.
You know, being in the family probably since the 1830s and being handed down from generations, so it becomes a part of you.
EUDR moved its compliance deadline to this month back in October. And because Europe buys a major share of Mississippi timber, this foreign rule now influences more than 19 million acres of your neighbor's land. Now, Mississippi's entire congressional delegation is urging the U.S. Trade Office to intervene. They say the rule threatens a $20 billion piece of the state's economy.
It's depressing the prices of our particularly pine timber, and we need to get this resolved.
For Ham, it's not just the economics, it's the fear.
Is somebody from the European Union going to come over and sue us?
And it's not just timber growers affected. This rule could raise construction costs, slow home building, hurt jobs, and limit what people can do with their own property. Commissioner Andy Gibson says they plan to fight until the rule is overturned.
We need to stop this, reset it, get it right, and make sure that our farmers do maintain the right to grow their wood, to harvest it, to sell it in Europe or anywhere else that it needs to be sold.
And despite the uncertainty,
that we feel this will be overturned.
Compliance begins December 30th, and the fight continues.
It remains to be seen if the new rule will actually stick. We'll have more on this story, including reaction from Mississippi Ag Commissioner Andy Gibson next week. Meanwhile, the concern over tariffs is still an issue in farm country. The White House has promised to help make farmers whole as they wait for exports to pick up. A recent story lays the foundation for a new announcement. Here's Peter Tubbs.
Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins suggested the long-discussed financial relief for America's farmers will be released next week. Secretary Rollins confirmed the bridge payment plan during a cabinet meeting at the White House.
Just a couple of days ago, China announced that they were going to halt all purchases from Brazil because they had found some irregularities in some of the soybeans they're buying from Brazil. And what that means is a continued signal that this country and our farmers produce the best, highest quality soybeans, sorghum, et cetera, in the world. And what you've been able to do is open those markets up and, again, move toward an era where our farmers are not so reliant on government checks, but they have the markets to sell their product. Having said that, we do have a bridge payment we'll be announcing with you next week as we're still trying to recover from the Biden years.
Ad hoc and disaster aid is expected to reach $40 billion, the highest single year of relief payments since 1933. There are questions surrounding the sourcing of the relief funds. The Wall Street Journal reported in September that the Commodity Credit Corporation had only $4 billion in its accounts.
In order for this to happen, I don't think the Secretary's got enough money to fulfill the figure that I've heard from the White House, that this aid might be somewhere between $10 billion and $14 billion. And I think it's going to take an appropriation by Congress to make up the difference.
The 43-day shutdown of the federal government is being blamed for some of the delay in delivering aid.
So with that in mind, as we prepared this broadcast, Secretary Rollins, during an ag roundtable just a couple of days ago, did announce that new bridge payment designed to help producers bridge the gap before new trade deals produce revenues next year. Here's that announcement.
We are very pleased to announce that today we are going to be effectuating an $11 billion bridge payment to our farmers. The money will move by February 28th of 2026, but by the end of this month, so just in the next couple of weeks, every farmer that is able to apply for it will know exactly what that number looks like. So as you are going to your lender, as you are working to ensure and understanding what you can plant for next year, you will have that number in hand. And we will continue to talk to our farmers, continue to understand exactly what this looks like and what is necessary. The final thing I'll say is
12 billion.
Well, we are holding $1 billion back. So today we are announcing $11 billion. We are holding $1 billion back just to ensure that we are covering. So today's announcement covers all of our row crops, but some specialty crops and others that we are still working with to best understand where they are in the farm economy and ensure that we're making every forward-moving position that we need to.
Quick note, during that roundtable, President Trump heard for the first time about the EU timber mandate we mentioned earlier in the show. He asked for more information from his cabinet and pledged to get that mandate eliminated.
Christmas just a couple of weeks away, and there's no better reminder than one of these when it comes to picking them out. You don't have to get flashy. Sometimes a little tradition goes a long way, especially this time of year. Here's Eddie Smith.
The holiday season wouldn't be the same without the classic beauty of poinsettias. Today on Southern Gardening, we're visiting Vesley's Nursery, where thousands of traditional red and white poinsettias are grown to bring festive color into homes and businesses across the South. When you step inside this greenhouse, it feels like walking into Christmas. Vesley's Nursery has perfected the art of growing poinsettias. From deep, velvety reds to crisp, clean whites, these plants are a holiday tradition that never goes out of style. Poinsettias are prized for their colorful bracts, those brightly colored leaves that are often mistaken for flowers. Here you'll find bracts in a variety of shapes and sizes, from broad, smooth forms to smaller, ruffled types that add texture and dimension. These vibrant bracts surround clusters of tiny yellow true flowers at the center, creating the poinsettia's festive look. If you're picking out a poinsettia for your home, look for plants with rich color, dark green leaves, and buds that haven't fully opened yet. With bright, indirect light and even moisture, they'll stay beautiful throughout the holiday season. From the greenhouse to your living room, poinsettias are sure to brighten up your holidays. Here's wishing you a season full of color and joy. I'm Eddie Smith. I look forward to seeing you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a quick break, but don't go away. Coming up, we have visited the Worthey Christmas tree farm in Amory. A look back. Now, Zac flashes forward with another trip back to the farm. Before you can decorate it, light it up, or stash presents under it, you've got to find your Christmas tree. Zac heads back to Amory, and just like before, boy, are those beauties worthy. Go behind the scenes where traditions are still being born. That's coming up on Farm Week.
don't go away.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith. I believe in my own work and in the opportunity I have to make my life useful to humanity. I believe that education is a lifelong process, and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families that I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith. I believe that education, of which extension work is an essential part, is basic in stimulating individual initiative, self-determination, and leadership. I believe that these are the keys to democracy, and that people, when given facts they understand, will act not only in their self-interest, but also in the interest of society. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance towards the views of others. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
Time for the market report. Prices slipping back again.
Indeed they are. We'll get into it and this month's WSDA. But first, the numbers. What were the week's biggest gains and losses? And then, this month's WSDA report. What did it have to tell us? And finally, in our row report, we discuss what's causing prices to slip back. So, markets closed split with row crops trending down while livestock going up. Let's take a look. The week's biggest gain, live cattle up over 9.5 cents. That's more than a 4% increase from the previous week. The week's biggest loss, soybeans down 32.5 cents, nearly a 3% decrease from the previous week. So this month's WSDA report dropped and had a good bit to say about current production and stocks both domestically and internationally. Seems there's not a lot of big changes over the past month. Nevertheless, here's what it had to say.
U.S. wheat supply and demand estimates are unchanged from last month, with some slight changes in feed and residual use. Season average farm price, $5 per bushel. Global wheat supplies up due to higher production in Canada, Argentina, the EU, and Russia. Consumption raised as well due to feed and residual use. Exports raised too, mostly from Australia, Canada, and Argentina. U.S. corn exports up 125 million bushels, while ending stocks down, the same reflecting export numbers. Season average farm price, $4 per bushel. Global corn production down, namely in Ukraine, Canada, Nigeria, Indonesia, and Senegal, reflecting a number of factors including weather and less planted acres. Exports raised for the U.S. but lowered for Ukraine. Global stocks at about 279 million tons. U.S. rice supplies down due to lower imports. Exports too reduced by 2 million hundredweight due to slow sales to Mexico and Latin America. Season average farm price $11.60 per hundredweight. Global rice supplies raised despite lower production due to higher beginning stocks. World consumption also down by 500,000 tons, while trade forecast up over 250,000 tons due to increases in Burma and China. Ending stocks about 189 million tons. U.S. soybean supply, use, and price projections are unchanged this month. Season average farm price $10.50 per bushel. Global soybean production and crush up nearly 1 million tons due to higher crops in Russia and India. Exports lowered due to less shipments from Ukraine and Benin. Ending stocks increased about 500,000 tons due to higher stocks in Brazil and Russia. U.S. beef production up due to rate of slaughter and higher dressed weights. Pork lower due to slower slaughter rate. Broiler and turkey production up based on industry data. Egg production unchanged. Milk production forecast unchanged from last month. Butter price forecast slightly up while cheese slightly down, and non-fat dry milk and whey prices unchanged. All milk price forecast $21 per hundredweight. U.S. cotton production raised 1% due to increased yields in the southeast and delta. Mill use down to about 1.5 million bales, the lowest in 150 years. Projected season average farm price 60 cents per pound. Global cotton production down by 3,000 bales due to less acreage, while consumption also down the same amount due to lower mill use in Brazil, the U.S., and Central America. Global trade down 250,000 bales, while ending stocks raised 40,000 bales.
So now you know what things look like on a national basis. What are the experts talking about? Market analyst John Roach says corn, despite prices dropping, is the result of us having an abundance and we're using it.
There is some question about whether yields were as good as what the USDA estimated in the last reports. We'll learn more in January for sure. But the ethanol demand has been excellent. In fact, this week we set a new record, a weekly record on ethanol production, and we're running at a faster pace than what the USDA forecast is right now. The demand from an export side on corn is also running at a faster pace. I think we're running about 7% ahead of the pace we would normally have in order to reach the USDA forecast. But again, we have a lot of corn. We're eating through a very big crop. When you look at it from a graphic standpoint, this year stands out considerably larger production than what we've seen in past years. And so we just have to eat our way through that. We think we're into a time frame on corn, and quite frankly on all the row crops that we raise. We're in one of those time frames where we came off of very big prices and tight supplies into a period of time with big production in South America as well as in the Northern Hemisphere. And now we have big inventories of everything, actually. And so we think that puts us into relatively narrow price ranges for the foreseeable future until something changes. And of course, you can change that in the Southern Hemisphere right now if the weather problems persist in some areas, and there are some weather issues there. We did see Dr. Cordonnier pull his bean estimate down for Brazil, 1 million tons this week. And so there is some possibility out there, and that's given us some of the price advance that we've had. But the reality is that we have big supplies, and that means that we're going to have a confined range of trade until that changes. Again, keep your eye on the Southern Hemisphere, and then in the Northern Hemisphere, when we get into our growing conditions and our situation. But at the moment, nobody's very worried about weather, or very worried enough about weather to give us much higher prices. So that's what's keeping the lid on the corn market, even though demand has been very strong.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. Looks like row crops evening out while livestock prices rising. Mike?
In this week's Encore feature, Zac heads back to Amory, Mississippi, this time to get a little more insight into what makes a Christmas tree farm tick, all the while reveling in the spirit of the season. If you've never hand-picked a Christmas tree, go with him. There's more than meets the eye, and here's a hint, it's not just about the tree.
This time of year certainly has a magical feeling. With cold weather setting in, thoughts go towards family and tradition. One of the oldest is the Christmas tree. These beautiful decorations have their own unique history, but who grows them? Why do they do it? And what does the Christmas tree business look like? To find out, I went to a local Christmas tree farm in Amory, Mississippi, Worthey Tree Farm.
So it takes about 5 years to really get into the business. So David and Vera Gray had the Christmas tree farm right up the road, started in the early 80s. And so I used to work for him when I was like in high school. And so then when they decided to retire, we took over the business in 2010. Your process is we have to start like in January of going out to the fields, and it's called propagation. So we actually take cuttings off the trees, and so those cuttings are rooted for the next year's trees. So that's kind of year, I guess, one in the greenhouse. Year two is when you actually plant that particular tree in your field. And so there's like basal pruning, all kind of different prunings that you have to do to get that tree ready, established, and all that. And then after that, you have to shear the trees twice a year. You got to spray fungicide every 21 days. It's a lot to it just in that between like the year 2 and year 5, to kind of keep them growing and fertilize them. We spray fertilizer on them to keep them growing. We grow the Murray cypress and Leland cypress and the Carolina sapphire, and the green giant is what our 3 or 4 different types are.
Our Christmas trees that we grow now were started as ornamental purposes like landscape break-ins, wind breaks, all that kind of stuff. And before that, they were growing pine trees, Virginia pine, Scotch pine, that we grew here at the farm. And they moved to Leland cypress due to disease purposes because the tip moth would get on the pine trees. And they moved to these ornamental trees, and they kind of look like the cedar tree. And they moved to those, and that they blew up when people started growing them. Everybody started growing them. It was easier to grow than a pine tree, because on pine trees, if you planted 1,000, you lost 500 as Christmas trees. So they wanted to move to something that was more sure. If you planted 1,000, you at least got 800.
It's not something many people would think about. Christmas tree farmers are like many other tree farmers across the state and the U.S. They face similar problems to those who grow pine trees or decorative ornamentals. Technically, that's exactly what the Christmas tree is, an ornamental. Although they don't hang over your head like a forest of pine, the Christmas tree business is a serious thing. Here in the Southeast, they have associations where growers can give and get advice.
We have like 3 or 4 states are kind of involved into the Southern Christmas Tree Association here. And so we have like our own little community that we can kind of, if we're needing help, any guidance or anything, we have people that can help us there. So once a year we all get together at either Louisiana, Alabama, or Mississippi, kind of one place or another, and we all get together and just have like a big convention. And so we kind of pick each other's brain, if we're having trouble with something or like that, we can always ask. Because we have some older growers in our association, so they've been there and done that. They really know, what to do and what not to do.
We try to help each other out because you don't want to see anybody struggling on something like that. So that association is a wonderful thing, we think. What's happened, we'll send a picture of one of our trees and say, have you ever had this happen to your tree before? And they'll say, yeah, it's this. So we can correct that. Or they may call us about, something happened to their tree, and we'll say, well, it happened to ours a couple years ago. So it's just it's a network of making it easy for everybody. Mistakes were made, I can tell you, don't do that or do this.
You'd think tree farmers would be in stiff competition with each other, but in truth, there's enough business to go around.
There's a few up in the north part of the state, but you can't, if there's 10,000 people in an area, you can't sell that many. So you're glad that somebody further on down the road, an hour from us, can open one, because then that kind of helps them out over there.
And that's the main thing, is just kind of growers helping growers. And we always encourage, if anybody is wanting to get into the association or into growing trees, it's always a good idea to have an association that you're part of, because there's no way for you to just start on day one and say, hey, I want to be a Christmas tree farmer, because there's so many things on what to do and what not to do.
Several years ago, I came out here to do another segment for Farm Week. At that time, this guy was super little. Now look how big he's gotten. You're just the biggest, prettiest tree. However, selling trees once a year is not enough to keep a farm afloat. So, like many others these days, Worthey Tree Farms has gotten into the business of agritourism.
We do like a pumpkin patch starts in October, so we kind of raise some of our pumpkins and all that. So we have birthday parties, we have gift shops, we have concession stands, we have some goats that the children can feed and pet. We have sleigh rides during the Christmas season out in the fields. So it's kind of like an experience, even in October and Christmas. It's an experience, that we try to have family first, and that they can come out and just kind of experience time with their family and just have a good time. So that's what it's all about.
One of the most important aspects of agritourism is bringing the community itself together. Establishing a local gift shop like this one is a good way to do that, because here they can sell local goods and services by the community.
Just little by little, we just want to offer more stuff just to, when you go out there and pick your tree out, it might take a little while for us to go cut it. You know, we might have, 20 or so people waiting on a tree. So we thought, well, if we had this for them to wait, that would help them not have just a boring wait. So we started building concession stands and buildings to set in party rooms, and it seems to be working. We got jumpies and all kind of fun stuff just to add to it.
But yeah, it's always about family. I always preach that, and everybody is so busy these days. So it's always kind of good to spend a couple of days with your family, and this is one of the days that I like to be able to kind of share our farm with.
It's no secret that people in the Christmas tree business take special care of the traditions in the event of a family picking out the perfect tree for themselves. It's good to know that those who grow the trees truly care. Merry Christmas.
Great story. Looks like you had a fun time shooting that one.
I did.
Well, next time on Farm Week, as we approach yet another new year, a trip back in time, simpler times for simple pleasures.
We'll bring you a Farm Week feature first produced nearly 25 years ago. You'll meet Mr. George Berry, a woodcarver extraordinaire.
Mr. Berry is gone now, but back then his carvings brought joy to the hearts of many, and he did it all the old-fashioned way with a pocket knife. That's next time on Farm Week.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.